Hi, I'm Jonathan, and this is the See a Guru podcast. In this podcast, I interview the various gurus on my new platform to help people find a coach and take whatever they're doing to the next level. Please make sure to subscribe and comment below to let me know what you'd like to know more about. What do you want to learn? What kind of guru would you like me to have on the podcast next? Be sure to like to encourage more of this type of content. Today, on my fourth ever episode, my guest has been a professional ghostwriter for over 25 years. He believes that understanding your voice and the importance of writing from the heart is the key to your success. He will help you to identify your goals early on and give you the tools necessary to be on your path to success. He believes that discovering the world of publishing is exciting and lucrative for those with the correct mindset. He is considered by those he has assisted to be a beacon of light amidst the foggy shores of success. If you're interested in learning more or finding out what he can do for you, you can find him online at seeaguru.com/Ghostwriter Supreme. So please welcome David Cenicola.
Hello, Jonathan. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
Great. Thank you for coming on board. So could you tell us what is a ghostwriter in your understanding of it?
A ghostwriter is someone who basically puts together a manuscript, a novel. It could be a memoir, crime fiction, anything that a client who is somebody who wants to have the book done and has the idea and is willing to pay the ghostwriter can put together and give notes, perhaps ideas, could be scripts, and the ghostwriter puts it all together and writes it out and has hopefully a great knowledge of what it takes to build a good novel. And that's what we do. We write it. We write the sentences. We write the descriptions, the characters, the dialogue, all from somebody's ideas and notes. Perhaps it's audio files that they send you, and we put it together.
I know you can't mention anybody by name, but why would somebody meet with you about ghostwriting? Can you talk a little bit about, without mentioning specifics, what have you done for ghostwriting? Like, what are some of some of your qualifications you can talk about?
My best novels have been memoirs and historical fictions. I was blessed to have clients over the years who had wonderful stories within their own families. Some were soldiers at war. Some were great heroes in battles for freedom for their individual countries. A lot of times the stories come from survival of a high degree of difficulty or abusive or bad childhood, and what the person has gone on to do to overcome and become a success in life in some endeavor. Many times people look back on their lives and they want to leave a legacy for their children and their grandchildren, and they want something written even if they never get it published. However, I've been fortunate that most of the times the folks, even who start out like that, wind up having a great story. They don't even know it sometimes, and they might self-publish at first, or some are fortunate enough to have an agent who takes them on and then promotes the book with mainstream publishing houses. Either way, the stories have come out with universal themes in a grand fashion, and they've taken off. So the characteristic of all of them is a client. I say a client because a lot of times to a ghostwriter, you're the worker and they're the client, they're the boss. So the word client is interchangeable with other words, but a lot of times a client, they really just want something written, and they're willing to invest the time and the money and the resources to do it. And they come to someone like me to do it. They don't have, a lot of times they have a great deal of experience in the world of business or corporate enterprise. Some are professors, teachers, um,
Hmm.
doctors, retired military, um, CEOs of major companies, and they have all that experience, but they've never put together a book. They don't know, and they even might be very good at writing things out. They might have a good style of narrative description and grasping the language in a way that's a step above most others. They don't have to, but some do. But even if they have that, it's hard to know how to put together a complete manuscript and get the book. A lot of times, it's all about the editing. It's learning what to put in and what to take out, what to cut. You can't go on to describe a life completely. Might take 800, 1,000 pages to do it justice. But guess what? That won't be publishable. You got to learn to cut
Yeah.
it back. So that's where the role of a ghostwriter with a lot of experience to know what's important to leave in, what you have to really develop, and what things can be narrated without full development. Those are the kinds of things that a ghostwriter knows or should know before they get started. Even for your audience, people that are trying to get into the world of writing and ghostwriting, there's a lot to learn. They might be good writers and they might have a lot of experience with their own stories or journals or things of that nature. But to know how to convert that into a novel um, with 20 chapters or 25 chapters and try to keep it under 80,000 words or try to keep it under 300 pages. These are the things that agents and publishing houses look for. And even if you're self-publishing, even if the client is self-publishing, their expenses go up exponentially once they get above 300-400 pages as far
Hmm.
as publishing a book. Uh, these are the things I would teach if I were hired as a guru through the CEO Guru site, and a lot more. But these are the things that you learn with time and experience.
And you have quite a bit of experience. I mean, you've written award-winning novels. You've been involved with writing 10 memoirs, 7 crime dramas, 5 romances, 2 science fiction novels, 4 self-helps, and 10 historical dramas, 2 of which were considered young adult dramas. So also dozens of short stories, articles, research-oriented writings, all kinds of things. Even plays and TV dramas and screenplays. So you've kind of touched everything. Is that
Yeah, it's
maybe?
amazing, and I appreciate it. I appreciate the nod. Yeah, I have. It was a passion at first, and still is. When I first started writing in college, I did it as a hobby. Also, I had some basic creative writing classes early on in my undergraduate degree, and I found that I always, I really love doing it. And people started coming to me to help them with their writing, and then some people had ideas of their own. I soon learned that um, whatever ideas I had from my own work, even my own stories, my own memoir, whatever it would be, that I worked better and actually wrote better for other people. I needed that objectivity. People say, "Why do you ghostwrite? Why don't you go off and write your own stuff?" I needed the objectivity. I needed someone to um, give me what they wanted, and I could deliver. When I try to do that on my own, it never comes out quite so well. Um, and so when I branched off and knew I was going to do writing for others, I really took it on. I took it, I embraced it, and I started taking on all kinds of projects. Um, and the freedom that gave me was because I didn't have to worry about getting published. I didn't have to worry about making money off of my own writing. It's very difficult to do. And don't get me wrong, I wanted to at some point, but because I became so successful so quickly doing other people's work, I said, why bother? The good thing is I'm able to invest all of my own ideas and themes and all of the things I would write on my own into other people's works. And a true writer doesn't care so much about notoriety. That's the thing. People say, well, you know, don't you want to become well known and famous and have your name? You know what? Guess what? Good writing stands alone and on its own, and it doesn't need a name behind it. The themes and the writing itself speak for itself, and that's what my goal has always been. So learning to become flexible and how did I attract all these other clients was because my writing was good because I
Yeah.
did have my own stuff. I didn't bother trying to get it published, but I used it as samples. And every client you'll ever have as a ghostwriter wants to see what you've done. And since you can't send what you've done from other clients because of non-disclosure agreements and copyright issues, I sent my own work as samples, and it's very good. And maybe one day I will publish it, but who knows? Right now, I haven't bothered, or I haven't needed to bother, I should say. And uh, yes, I was blessed with the ability to attract a number of clients and made some money over time doing it. And other people can do the same. The thing I want to say too is about that is, you know, I'm always people always ask me how many books can you write a year. I mean, how long did it take you to do all that you mentioned? And it took a while. It's been over 25 years, and there's even a lot more that I don't even bother putting on my resume or anything right now because basically I know what I've done. I could write about a good 300-page book in about 3 or 4 months.
Wow. And being that you don't get the notoriety yourself, you don't get the benefit of building up a brand and sort of working from that. Your writing, even more so than a normal writer, I feel like has to stand on its own. It has to stand on its own legs. So you have to make sure that it's tight, that you have the mechanics in place. Would you agree
Exactly.
with that?
I would agree 100%. Most ghostwriters learn to edit their own work. You have to. You don't want to send and pay someone to edit something you've just written because then you're going to give out some of your profits to do that.
Hmm.
Good editors are very expensive. Clients don't realize the amount of time it takes to go through a 300-page manuscript. Um, so why would I want to? So I learned early on, instead of paying someone else, I'm going to do the editing myself. So I go through it 2 or 3 times. I write, go back, I rewrite, I go back, edit, proofread. The people I do pay are readers. I want to get feedback, and I have I guess about 10 or 12 readers that I pay. You don't have to pay them so much, but you want their objective opinion. And every one of
Hmm.
them that I have knows I don't want any BS. I want them to give me their honest opinion of what I've done or what I've written. And so basically, through that, over time, um, when you have a number of people that are readers and who do nothing but read good books, throughout their lives, um, you can almost hear in your own head what they're going to say about your writing as you're writing it. So it saves time and it saves a few extra steps because I can pretty much cut out the nonsense. I don't need to go back and rewrite. When I did one, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I was writing. It took me a lot longer, and I had to rewrite sometimes 3 or 4 times something that until I polished it into final form. Whereas
Hmm.
today, the experience I have now, I don't need to do that so much. Maybe twice, two, maybe 3 times at most, and it's ready. It's ready to go.
So, what are the ingredients of a good story?
Oh, um, good question. I believe that I've always believed this. 99% of us out there in our lives have a great story. It's not what the story is, it's how it's told. Um, and it's the narrative voice that you portray for the person going through those experiences that makes all the difference. And most of us have family members that we have support from, but we also have some that we have conflict with. Most of us have work teammates, that we get along great, and others that we know are after us are going to give us a hard time or compete with us. Um, Decision making. Most of us make decisions at the time the decision is needed to be made with the best information we have going forward. That's the crux of a good story, is to the reader sees the person, the client in this case, um, going through, if it's a memoir. I write a lot of memoirs, so I'm talking now as if it's a memoir, going through the growth process and making the best decisions that he could at that point in that stage of his life. Now, if we're talking about fiction, it's the same idea. The protagonist is always going to um, become well known and liked by the reader if they feel he's well rounded, but also if they feel he's real, making decisions, but also making mistakes along the way. Uh, Heroes are good, but even heroes who are perfect aren't so likable, We all have
Hmm.
faults, and so our protagonists and and even within a memoir, the hero of the memoir, the person who I'm writing about, you have to show every side to them, and also every side, most sides to the people around them, whether they be the parents or siblings or uh, classmates in school. And that's what makes a good story. Bottom line is, it's full of interesting people doing interesting things and making good decisions sometimes, and sometimes not so good. And how they react to that is the most important part of good writing. But the reader has to be involved. The reader has to see that, and see the process of hopefully of growth and change, as far as in a memoir, or also in a novel of fiction, the process of overcoming some obstacle or challenge to be able to rise above it, and become successful. And by successful, it doesn't mean he has to be making millions of dollars. It just means he has to be accepting of himself and successful, and as far as life is okay, and he can get by and do what he has to do to survive. It's all about learning to survive in a kind of wicked world.
So it seems like growth and change is a key element. Do you start with, when you're writing a new story, do you start with the plot, or do you let sort of the growth and change of the character drive your story?
Could be either way. For the most part, uh, and I'm going to again discriminate between a memoir and a fiction, uh, or even a historical fiction. For memoirs, a lot of times people don't see their own plots. Um, they know they have a good story. They know their lives were interesting, um, but they don't see the story behind it, the common themes, the universal themes, the um, things that the reader are going to be involved with, and the things that will resonate with them. So basically, what you do is, once I get a person's life story, look at the notes, I kind of know already where they have succeeded and where they have had some missteps. And to me, that's the story right there, is the progress of mentioning both the missteps and the problems and the conflicts, but always with the idea of how is that person learning to resolve that, even if they haven't been able to successfully do so at that time. By the end of the novel, we want to know what's on the road ahead, and what they will do to overcome and to succeed. Even if they haven't gotten there all the way, we just want to know they're on the right track and can get there. So that's basically where the story comes in. For novels, especially thrillers with lots of twists, or crime dramas, even romance,
Hmm.
let's say, you it's almost like you're trying to be one step ahead of the reader. You know what you're laying out, and you know what the plot's going to be, And you want to disclose just enough to keep the reader guessing while not giving everything away until the very end, of course. But along the way, you can introduce so many ways of doing that and so many different characters and twists in the plot that you have room to develop subplots and themes and other likable characters and other um, hated characters, which is just as good sometimes. Uh, so yeah, you see, as a writer, right, as a ghostwriter, and that's why when the client has these ideas, you help them develop their ideas, you help them see these things, but you have to be able to grasp it pretty quickly ahead of time in order to feel comfortable working and writing about it. So it's something you get better at as you go along. Um, the
So,
whole idea is that the love of writing, the love of seeing words that you put down on paper, which open up a whole world to a person reading them. It's like poetry. Every page, every paragraph has to be poetic and has to stand out and be pronounced. That's what makes good writing. It doesn't have to be a great story, but it has to be something that the reader, as they turn each page, the whole world is opening up to them. Whatever your setting is, whatever your characters are, whatever the dialogue is or the dialects that the people are using. Um, this has to be a whole new world, and you're welcoming the reader into it and bringing them right there along with you. And
so
that's what
the
makes
the
good
love
writing.
of so the love of writing, how would you say that it manifests in your writing? Like if you read a novel by somebody who you can tell is just in it for the profit versus you read a novel by somebody that you can tell is just their heart is really in it. What is the difference?
Another great question. People who love writing know they love writing. They know they have that gift. That it's something intrinsic, and they either have it or they don't. A lot of times people want to write and they just never get it. They never have it. When I read books by famous authors, the classic authors throughout the ages, um, yes, I can tell definitely between someone writing because they're trying to impress you, in which case it's almost fraudulent writing. It's like the writing itself is too self-conscious versus effortless writing, which brings you right into it, and there's no pretense, there's no ulterior motive. You know that writer spent that time organizing these words and sentences just for your own benefit, just so that you can live in that scene that he's describing to you and live among those characters that he's bringing to you. So the difference is, to me, clear. I can see it, and I know that all the best writing I've ever read was done through authors whose intentions were just to be good writers. That's breaking down in this day and age, by the way. People selling themselves out, selling themselves short just to make a buck with social media. They want to get on and they just want to be famous and do some posts and do some quick articles that are gotcha, just to
Sure.
get
I actually have a
followers.
I have a question about that. I feel like some people like writing, love writing even, but it is about the money for them, not in a bad or cynical way, but in the fact that they have bills to pay and they feel like, how can I get to the point where I can be a full-time writer unless I'm focusing about the money? I think it's great that somebody has a love for writing, but what would you say to somebody who is saying, "Hey, David, I'm working a full-time job, or maybe I lost my job because of COVID, and I need my writing to pay the bills. I love it, but I also need it to pay the bills." What would you say to somebody like that?
Now, another good question. So that would come down to what are they trying to accomplish with their writing in terms of do they want followers or do they want to create a product and a novel? If they want to do novels, I would tell them right away, you're in good hands. If you love writing and you want to create a novel for a person that's willing to pay you to do so, opportunities are endless. I turn away jobs right and left. And I'm not saying this to, blow myself up to being a big
Sure.
hero, but the truth is, good writers are hard to find. Clients are a dime a dozen. There's many people right now trying to get books written, but they have no clue how to do so. So they're going to websites to find writers for novels. I have every last resource necessary to find those clients under my belt, and I know the next step, which is the importance of learning how to negotiate and come up with a fair contract between you and them, so that you're both protected and the writing is done well, and the writer is rewarded for the work, the hard work, and the hours they put in to do the writing. Um, so that's one step. The other aspect to what you were asking, which is very true, people, a lot of people, a lot of good writers are selling themselves out because they want followers. They want to just uh, get money over the internet through having all these followers, and finding ways to write something that will attract 1,000, 100,000, or 1,000,000 likes. Um, I know very few writers that can do that over time successfully without, and I hate to say that, but it's selling themselves out, because for them to be able to continue learning to grab their audience, they've got to come up with newer and newer dazzling headlines and writing about things that uh, somewhat are controversial, but there's so many writers out there doing that. I don't know how much more of room we need for writing like that. There's very little left that can be written article wise, and over time, those folks tend to peter out because they can't sustain it. It's very hard to over time. Um, if you look at journalism, that's closer. That kind of writing is closer to journalism in my mind, or article writing for magazines and newspapers. Um, but if you look at that and look at the state of our country right now too, you'll see how divisive that can become. You have to almost target an audience and teach them to hate certain people, or to have an enemy, or seek retribution somehow. Those are the ones that make money, but I don't know if that's doing us all any good. Whereas a good book, a good novel, a good story with universal themes that help people overcome tragedy, or loss, or um, just life's hardships. We could always use a good story like that, and we could always use new writers willing to invest their perspective in learning how to write about stories from people who are survivors and who are trying to do good, and teach the world a lesson about going forward and doing well. I don't want to, put down too much. Some of the articles out there and the writers of those articles are very good and they have very good intentions. It's just difficult over time to sustain that. I see a lot of writers crashing over time as well, because after a while they start losing their momentum, let's say.
So, if you're trying to get started in writing and you're trying to pay the bills, you're trying to get your foot in the door, it seems like you would recommend ghostwriting as a way to do that, because it seems like there's a lot of clients out there, like you said, who are almost breaking down the door to try and find authors who are good. So what if you're not good though? What if you're new? How did you get started in ghostwriting? How did you get your
Well,
first few clients, and how did you get to the point where it was your main job?
so basically, again, when you write from the heart and you write something that's enjoyable for yourself to do, um, it's not so much of a burden. It's coming into work or sitting at your desk every day for a few hours, doing something that brings you life and joy and a sense of accomplishment. So once, if you could find yourself doing that and doing that often, uh, and then rereading what you've written and rereading how it affects others by asking them their opinion and understanding how your writing has come across. That's how it starts. That's how you develop your voice as a writer. Uh, Even if it's another person's story or another person's life, it's still your voice and your words coming through, which is the medium of writing, the word, the written word, and it's not. It's almost like a painting, but I would describe it more as a sculpture, where someone gives you a big blob of clay, and they expect you to kind of define it and refine it and beautify it. Uh, their life or their story that they give you is that blob of clay, and your task is to see it and carve it and express it and let it express itself. Um, how do you get started? Well, if you enjoy doing that, if you can enjoy putting down, I often tell people write one incident from their lives, their own lives, something that stands out. It could be from their childhood or their school years or college years, whatever it is, and just write it out. Put the characters down, put the person down from the first person perspective, and and narrative style, and then add to it, embellish it, make it beautiful, whatever it is. Even if it's a terrible story, it can still be beautiful. It can still stand out. And once they're happy with it, and they think they've refined that as well as they could, whether it be 2 pages or 3 pages, show it to everybody that they can, and get an idea of how it comes across. That's a lot of my work. Is even if I don't take on a client's contract, I will look at their work, and I'll give them sound advice as far as what's needed, or what they did well and what they didn't do so well. I've learned to see someone's writing in a matter of minutes, and I can tell them exactly where they're at and what they need to learn to do to make it better. I think that's the skill that I've developed now over the last 10 years in my writing, is helping other writers, and I've learned to do it because it's a joy. It was a joy to me. I learned on my own for the most part, although I had a few good instructors in my um, college years, both during my bachelor's and my master's programs, that loved writing and loved good writing, and I was always encouraged by those people to do better, inspired to try harder. And that's what I'm here to do now for others as well. Clients will come to you if you can get on a website where people are asking to have something written, and you just start talking or chatting or emailing and giving them, let them tell you what they want, and then you give them a sample of what you can do. If you're good at it, you'll get clients, and that's how it starts. Back in my day when I started, we didn't do the computer, so it was all word of mouth. But I was in big universities, and I had a lot of professors and people around me that were interested in good writing. So it was easy to be in those communities where I could start writing and helping people with their own ideas. And that's when I realized what my gifts were. When the internet hit, and um, starting off with certain websites that did freelance work, it didn't become easier necessarily. It was just a change, or adapting to find ways of expressing everything I would say in person over the internet. So developing a profile on these websites is important. Being able to chat freely and talk openly by phone, or even through emails, that's important to do. Representing yourself and what you can do, that's all part of the learning process, Jonathan. You have to really learn how to do two things at the same time. You have to grab your client's interest and let them know you know what you're doing, but at the same time, you have to be aware that almost 95% of them are going to throw more at you than you're able to take on. And what I say by that is that they're not aware of how much work goes into good writing. They're not aware of the time it takes to develop a whole page into a perfect, beautiful story, let's say. So you have to be able to um, advocate for yourself as a writer and know how to tell them and show them why it will take you the time it will take you and the work it will take to do it, so that you take care of your own financial needs in terms of developing the contract and uh, um, getting paid for the work you are going to do. But you have to know that ahead of time, because a lot of times writers will fall into a contract because they're so eager to take it, and then they realize, oh my God, I have 3 months of full-time work ahead of me, and I'm only going to get paid such and such dollars. And by the time they work it out, they're realizing they're going to get paid $5 or $6 an hour, which is no good for anybody. So you've got to really stand up for yourself and demand. And believe me, I'm at the point where for years now, I'd rather lose a contract because a client wasn't willing to pay it than take on something that is going to overwhelm me and make me miserable because I'm putting too much time into it. That's a common mistake. Writers do that, and freelancers do that all the time.
So can you talk a little bit about the common pitfalls of being a ghostwriter? One of them you just mentioned is biting off more than you can chew. Are there any others that if somebody was getting into ghostwriting and they're just getting their feet wet with it, what's something they should avoid? What's some mistakes that you made when you started that you would like them to avoid?
Um, the they fall into that same realm, knowing that to a client you're expendable right from the start is important to know. And I hate to say that, but it's true. These clients now on these websites, they realize that they have 50, 60 people that might apply to their post about their jobs. So if you're not willing to do what they want, they're going to just say, okay, they're going to spit you out and go on to someone else. You don't want to ever overpromise, and so at the same time, you want to make sure you got that locked in and that they're aware of how much good work you're going to do for them, I guess is the thing. You have to keep the momentum with your client going. Otherwise, it'll shift against you. Um, you have to start like almost like you have nothing to lose mentality as a freelancer. You have to go in there and say it as it is. Not be afraid of it. Not be afraid of telling them what you need and what's going to be how many hours you're going to be putting into this job, and let them know this is why I demand or expect this amount of pay. If you don't, then they're going to be able to overwork you and demand too much, um, and you're going to fail. You're going to give up, saying, "Well, I'm not going to be able to make enough money. I'm putting too much time and work into this." That's one of them, I guess. Realizing how much you could take on is also another key step to learning your own limits. How many hours can you put in a week? How much writing can you do in one day? Sometimes people get tired after writing for 2 or 3 hours or 4 hours in a row. So you got to be able to take a break and get away from it for a while and then come back. I found what works for me is taking on 2 or 3 contracts at a time, no more, no less. I could devote 2 or 3 hours to one contract in the morning. If I try to go back to that same contract in the afternoon, sometimes I'm not ready to. I need more time to think it through. I need time to have a little distance from it. But if I start working on something else, then my creative juices are more available to me, and I can do another 2 or 3 hours in a different vein. Maybe it's a whole completely different story, a different setting. That all makes a difference. So as a writer, if you keep tapping on the uh, same vein, let's say, then it's going to wear out after a while. So you want to change and have different sources to go back to. Um, So and that's it. If every writer's different, and they've got to learn to develop and understand their own limitation and their own capacities as well.
What would you say to somebody who was asking, should I go into ghostwriting or should I go into writing for myself? Is there a concrete advantage just starting with ghostwriting, or should somebody who is trying to write for themselves go into ghostwriting if they're not seeing success?
Another good question. I've coached writers many times, and they've only wanted to write their own stuff, and that's great. If they have the ability and the means to do so, then by all means they should pursue that. And they should still get the help and advice and guidance they need, and that's where I would come in. And there, I've been able to train writers to write wonderful manuscripts. I would later on proofread them, edit them perhaps if needed, but I was able to give them enough information to go off on their own and do what they needed to do. At the same time, somebody coming in looking to make money that's a good writer, that's what I'm there for, is to teach them all the things that we were talking about negotiating and how to help and develop your client's story and take on clients. So I think it's a matter of where they're at in their lives, in their careers, money-wise, security-wise, what they need. A lot of times we don't have the choice at first, and we need the money, and ghostwriting, at least, you're going to get paid. Whereas if you're trying to write something to make money on your own, there's no guarantee. People have really, really wasted 3 or 4 years, not wasted, but 3 or 4 years of their life writing one or two stories that they thought were going to get published, and found out that they couldn't, or they wouldn't, and they weren't good enough, or they didn't know the right people. The publishing field is vicious, and it's not even about good writing. Sometimes it's about knowing the right person. So that's a little bit of a segue away from what you were asking me about. But people think if they have a great story that it's going to automatically get published and they're going to make a lot of money if they could just write it well enough. And that's not so at all. Sometimes every publishing house has a whole team of agents submitting manuscripts to them. Every agent has hundreds of manuscripts on their desk right now. Some of the best writers you and I ever heard about might have waited 3 or 4 years with their manuscript on an agent's desk before it ever even got looked at. That's how competitive it is right now. People don't. There might be, for every great published book that you or I can read, there might be 100 more of them that have never been published because they were never read, or they're still waiting on some publishers or some agent's desk to be read. They didn't have the right contacts. They didn't have the right push. If you know somebody, it's easier. You can get them to read it, and then if it's good, they'll invest their time to promote you and to publish it. But it's very hard to do. So I would recommend a person who's thinking about either to know what their resources are and how much they can support themselves for 2 or 3 years before they make that decision.
Do you think that the industry has changed in 2020 with COVID, with everybody rushing to get into writing, thinking that they can replace their lost income with writing? I feel like there's a lot of people right now who are saying, okay, this is the best time to become a writer. This is a great time to jump in. Everybody's working from home. Has that changed the game, in your opinion?
Yes. Yes and no. Yes, it has, because there's more people out there, both as freelancers, and there's more people trying to get books written now. They have the time. They're not as busy, and their stories have become more complicated in many ways. And there's also many more freelancers who have decided to work from home. and it's flooded the market in a way. Uh, However, I could say with certainty that it hasn't brought a lot of good writers in. It's just brought a lot of other writers into the system. And good writing is good writing. It always stands out and always stands above anything else that's being written or done out there. So it should not dissuade a good writer from working or trying or learning. In fact, they should feel and embrace this opportunity more than ever because there's so many more opportunities to write for people. Whereas in the past, I might go to a website and I might find four or five people across this country, United States, looking for a memoir to be written. Now I can go on the same websites and there's 20 or 30 of them. It's amazing. It's crazy the way it's blown up that way. Then again, the prices haven't gone up so much, but if you're a good writer, you demand what you are worth and expect, and the good clients, the ones you really want, will know that and understand that, and they'll hire you. Whereas you don't want to attract the clients that don't know that. They're going to drive you crazy. That's the other learning experience is that uh, there's a lot of clients out there that will drive you crazy, and they don't know exactly what they want, and they expect you to figure it all out for them. But that's not a good collaboration because some of them are never going to be happy because basically they don't know what they're looking for to begin with. And it's very hard for them to express to you what final product they are looking to have done. So learning to weed out the good clients from the bad is crucial as well as a learning experience in this whole thing.
Is there any tip you would give for weeding out the good clients from the bad, other than making sure that they understand the time involved and that they appreciate the work that goes into it?
Yeah, that's a good question too, and I guess the best way to look at that is let them negotiate with you or negotiate with them so that it's not the quality of what final contract you've developed with them so much as the process that it took to get there. Pay attention to everything they say, either by email or on the phone or video, uh, and also how you respond to that and see how they respond back to your response. And what I guess I'm trying to say is if there's something there that seems out of place, there's a reason for that. And if it's out of place at that beginning part of the process, many times that's going to explode and it's going to become really out of place later on in the process. And then you're going to be frustrated. So pay attention to all those signs right away. Um, a good negotiation between a client and a freelancer has to be somewhere in the middle. It shouldn't be too quick. It shouldn't be too long or lengthy. It shouldn't be. A lot of times they'll throw something up after you've come close to final agreement. They'll say, well, I also have this I need done. Or, I originally said it was going to be 60,000, but I'm looking through my notes and it's going to be 70,000 uh, words instead. That's a big red flag because those are the kind of people that they're manipulating you already, and they're trying to get more work out of you than you've agreed to, and you'll be able to see that right from the start. Basically, not right from the start, but you'll be able to see that through the negotiation process if you pay attention before you finally sign the contract and sign the final contract with them, whether it be through the website or independent between you and them. That's why I always advise taking a few extra steps to clarify everything, and sometimes making them question their intentions thoroughly before you finally agree to what you're going to do with them. Uh, so that's what I would teach as a mentor to people looking to start off new, uh, and I think that um, it's hard to explain in words, but it's something that I would work with a ghostwriter, a up and coming ghostwriter to learn how to do. You have to take a few extra steps and question them ahead of time so that they know you know what you're talking about. And there's a few questions you can ask. I'm not going to divulge them here, but there's a few questions you can ask that you can pretty much get them to see, or you can get to see how they're responding to you so that you'll know that they're legitimate and they're not trying to manipulate or take advantage of you.
Can you walk us through what does the typical negotiation process look like? What are the steps that you go through in negotiation? Like, let's say you've already met the client, you're talking with them on the first meeting. Take us from that point until the contract is signed.
Through the negotiation process, I would always advise writing about one incident. I go back to that again, but it's good. It's a good practice. If you can get their attention in writing about one incident, which would take about 2 or 3 pages, maybe 700, 1,000 words, and they like that, it's not going to take too much of your time. I would do that for free, even just to give them an idea of what, kind of like a consultation, what I'm able to deliver for them. Sometimes I charge $50, let's say, just for that. It depends on the type of client, how old they are, you have to figure out how motivated they are to get this done. You kind of have to figure out, and through the websites you can do this, you have to figure out how many people are they interviewing, how many people have they sent proposals to, or things of that nature. And so basically you want to, once you get all that and you're able to deliver what comes down to being a test incident, let's say, then if they like that and they like your style, then you got to be ready to go to the next level and say, well, let's develop this idea. This is what I'm willing to do for you in so much time. Let's say a quarter of the novel in a month and a half or a month. We're going to agree to how many words. Let's say 300 pages comes to about um, usually about 70 or 80,000 words, and you don't want to go too much over that unless they have a really great story. But then you've got to let them know, basically, no publishing house is going to take, unless it's outstandingly fantastic, a manuscript of over 300 pages. The typical publishing format is double space times New Roman 12, and that's how you get word count and page numbers out of that. And you want to be able to do all that and tell them and show them these are the things. And you're willing to go further, but you're going to charge more if they want to go more than that. Or if they're going to self-publish, you let them know which it's going to cost them more to self-publish it if it's going to be 400 or 500 pages. And from there, the negotiations kind of start falling into place. If they're really interested in you and you say, well, this is what I'm going to be able to deliver, the websites for freelancers will have a contract right there that you could set up with milestones where you agree on how many pages are going to be delivered, how much of the pay for the total budget are you going to get for that milestone, let's say, and you could develop it and write it out on the website and exactly as you see it, and then the client has to agree to it or not. And if they do agree to it, then you're hired and you're ready to go. The steps before all that come into where you would question how uh, how persistent are they going to be with this project? Are they going to be able to stand uh, and do the time that they have to do to put into the project to develop it with you? If they're going to collaborate, if you need clarification on their notes, if you have questionnaires, these are all the things you've got to be able to figure out ahead of time so that you let the client know that I need you to be on top of this, and otherwise it's going to delay the timeline that we've agreed to. If I have a questionnaire, I'm going to send you about a certain part of your life that I need more clarification. Either we're going to do it on phone for an hour or two once a week, or I'm going to send you the questionnaire and I expect hopefully you'll be able to get it back to me within 3 or 4 days, something like that. Those are all the things you've got to iron out. Otherwise you get trapped in an endless barrage of missed negotiations, and then you're both wondering, where the hell are we? Why didn't we know about this ahead of time? These are all the things you've got to become astute at doing with your clients, so that they know you know what you're doing.
What are the major problems that you can solve for somebody that if they did mentoring with you, what's the major problems that you would be able to get rid of them in say an hour meeting?
For someone who's trying to become a ghostwriter, or for a client that wants something written?
Let's say somebody who's trying to become a ghostwriter. If somebody wanted to sit down with you for an hour, what kind of problems in their life would you address with them and be able to resolve?
Okay, so for an hour session for something like that, I would, if they listen to this podcast, which I'd recommend, all of these questions that you've brought up, and some of the responses that I've given would be a great place to start, um, because it addresses really everything that they're going to have to look at knowing to be able to deliver to their clients, even through the negotiation process. So I think for people that are coming into this really wanting to become a ghostwriter and learning how to do it right, they have to be sure of their own writing, first of all, but then they have to learn all the negotiations. So my job as their um, as their teacher or instructor is to make sure they have the skills, and that they're comfortable with their writing style, but then also give them everything that I'm trying to give you in this podcast, but also develop each of those ideas and give them the information, give them the notes so that they can start organizing it and see it for themselves, so that when they address their first client, they're going to be ready, and they're not going to be caught off guard or in the blind, by things that they haven't even necessarily thought about or considered yet. These are the hard lessons, as I've often said. You learn by mistakes, and if I can help them avoid mistakes and become successful 2 or 3 years more quickly than they would have on their own, I think then I'm doing a good service for them. And within an hour, I could do a lot. Probably within 2 or 3 hours, I could do a lot more. Depends on their time and how much they're willing to invest. But that's why we leave it open, and I start off with an hour or even a half an hour, just to get them familiar with the ideas that I'm going to bring about, and then I let them come back to me as they want to, so that they can always learn more, or specifically ask to learn more about one part of the process and develop that for themselves. So it's flexible. I'm kind of intuitive when it comes to understanding where they're at and what they will need to learn more about. And when I ask the questions that I ask of them, I kind of open up the ideas that need to be addressed, and can figure out and help them figure out what they need to learn more about.
David Cenicola, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I feel like this has been very valuable. And I just want to let the listeners know that they can find you at seeaguru.com.
And I appreciate it so much. It's been a pleasure. And I thank you for investing your time and energy into this wonderful work, because I think it's going to help out a lot of people.
Thank you so much. And just one more time, that's seeaguru.com/Ghostwriter Supreme.